Hey, folks, welcome. Hope you're having a great week so far. Only a few hours into Monday, but still, hope things are going fantastic. I want to follow regular protocol and make sure you can all see and hear me all right. So let me go ahead and ask you to chime in. Let me know if you can see and hear me all right, and we'll go ahead and get started. Me, I had a nice 3-day weekend since, hey, Kaylee, fantastic. I had a pretty good 3-day weekend because my wife actually had Friday off, so we got a lot of work done around the house. That's awesome. Okay, Ahmed, Afnan. All right, yes, Nicholas. Sounds like we are good to go, so let's go, right? Let's jump into our presentation here. Um, so this week, this is actually our last lecture, right? Our last module. What we're going to do next week, just so you know, is prepare for the final. Just if you're watching right now, and if you're going to stop later on, let me sell the final review. If you join me for the final review and follow along and take notes during that, you will be so set. You'll be in fantastic shape. So don't miss next week. We're going to review the final. But that means that today, hey, Waleed and Mariana, we've got you guys. Fantastic. We're going to talk about social responsibility and ethics. And it's kind of cool that we're ending on this because we've come a long way, right? We've talked about the origins of all kinds of business principles, where they started, why they started, and the conditions under which they started, and how they affect us today. That's been the main thing. Oh man, Nicholas, I'm glad. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that, saying you're going to miss the lectures. There's going to be a lot more coming. Subscribe to Nutshell Brainery, and I've got mega plans for the fall. But, you won't be in class, but you can still benefit. Let's see. Yeah. And Brock, you're right. There's only a quiz for this module. There's no discussion for this module. So you follow along today, you take notes today, you pay attention to where we're referencing things in the readings and scan those readings, you're going to be in great shape. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go ahead and start. We're going to look at 3 readings today. Jacob Needleman, philosopher, an interview he did with Bill Moyers. And then Greening of Corporate America, talking about environmentalism. And then finally, we're ending with Cooperation in Industry by Rockefeller Jr. And I think it's actually kind of cool that we end with Rockefeller Jr. because he kind of brings this whole question of social responsibility and ethics, into really stark contrast with what corporate America is kind of normally chasing. And he says, whoa, we need to remember what this is all about. So we're going to do that. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. Jacob Needleman, philosopher. Now, what this section is really about, this reading is really about ethics. Now, we explored ethics last week in our lecture, but we're going to review it a little bit more here, just so we really have it crystal clear in our heads what ethics are, why they are, and kind of set the context so that then when we talk about what Jacob Needleman has to say about the ethics of money, we kind of have some understanding of where he's coming from. So first, let's remind ourselves of a few things. This really is going to help set the context for what Needleman is talking about, because as a philosopher, he's going to get way weird, right? And so we want to make sure that we've calibrated our brains for the way weird. So what's money? Well, we've talked about this quite a bit in this course. It's a universally accepted abstract of the symbol of value. What do we mean by that? Well, whenever we exchange things, when we trade, when we barter, when we exchange goods and services, we create value. But how do you represent that value in a way that other people will willingly trade for it? And so what we've done is we've created money that everybody universally, I mean, obviously a few people won't, but in general, in aggregate, everybody universally accepts this weird piece of paper as something of value. It is a symbol that represents the value that was created in the exchange, in the transaction. And since it's universally accepted, we can take this dollar or this yen or this pound or this franc. Actually, it's not franc anymore. Euros, right? I'm old. And we can take them all over the place and people will accept them. Now, remember, abstract means it exists in thought as an idea, but it doesn't have any real physical existence. Value does not have any real physical existence. Hand me a bucket of value. You can't do it. Now, you and I know what value is. It exists in our head as an idea, and we can define value, but it doesn't truly exist in tangible form. And so what we do is we create symbols that symbolize the value. This piece of paper symbolizes one unit of value. And so therefore we have this currency going about that represents value. Okay, you remember all that, just a reminder. Now, he says something about money. He says money is meant to be an index or an instrument involving human relationships. So money has to do with ethics. It is a way of exchanging with each other what we need, of implementing the human-to-human relationships. So now, this is why he says money has to do with ethics. Let's kind of put what he says into human language, right? He says, listen, we as human beings, we need each other. We need each other. This human-to-human relationship, we really need one another to survive and to thrive. And surviving and thriving, by definition, means creating and increasing mutual value. Well, all of this has to do with ethics, because ethics is all about how we treat one another. More about this in just a moment, okay? But since ethics is how we treat one another, and money is sort of how we measure the value of treatment, money, therefore, is something that needs to be considered in the context of ethics. So, as he says, money is meant to be an index or instrument involving human relationships. And yeah, when you really think about it, it's weird how money kind of influences our relationships. I'm just going to toss some things out here. This is not a value judgment. If you agree or disagree, or if you feel these things or don't feel these things, not a value judgment. But I just want you to mull these things over. In some cases, when, let's say that you have a husband-wife, and the husband earns more than the wife, well, that's just kind of normal, man. It's just the way it is. So no big whoop. But in some cases, the wife earns more than the husband. And that puts, in some cases with some men, the men into this weird funk. Because it's like, well, I'm the man. I'm supposed to be the provider. And what does it say about my masculinity if my wife earns more than me and my sense of value? See how it's strange that money really, measures our sense of value, even with relationships. Furthermore, in this country anyway, this is not the case in all countries, we don't really talk about, nor is it really appropriate to ask how much someone earns, because we kind of think of this as a measurement, a metric of our value as a person, and therefore our value in the community. So I just want you to kind of understand and embrace the idea that money is more than just about exchange of goods and services. It's about the, relationship between one another. Okay, so let's keep going. Ethical versus moral. Now, remember, we talked about this, but we're going to come back to it. This is from the reading. Ethics refer to our outer actions. Action, what we do. What you do, okay? What you do. But inwardly, you are moral. That is, you are in touch with something that's truer, more your right nature, your real nature. As a result of being moral, you act in a way that can be judged ethical, right? So once again, actions have everything to, ethics, I apologize. Ethics have everything to do with actions, how we kind of exude and personify and exemplify our inner morals. Inside, we all have morals, we all have values. But ethics is what we actually do with these North Stars, our morals and values in place. Now, remember, and this is a reminder, ethics are the standards of behavior that tell us how humans ought to act in the many situations in which they find themselves as friends, parents, children, citizens, business people, teachers, professionals, and so on, right? So again, ethics has everything to do with action and behavior. Now, remember, we talked about, okay, well, there's a value such as an inward personal guiding principle, like I always try to tell the truth. Whereas a moral is one that the whole community says, you know what, we could actually really benefit as a community if we all agreed to, abide by this particular value. So we're going to codify it. We're going to write it in stone, if you will, going by the Judeo-Christian tradition. Thou shalt not bear false witness, right? Or in the Muslim tradition, speak as the angel Gabriel commanded Muhammad, speak right. And that codified these values into something the whole community could follow. And then we have laws. This is when a moral is actually written down and can be enforced and has consequences, right? So we have laws about libel, slander, perjury. These are enforced and they have consequences. But ethics is the best thing to do, the action, the best thing to do, the best way to behave given the circumstance. And therefore, in our previous lecture, I said a parent may choose to tell their child that, yes, Santa Claus is real. There is a Santa Claus. Now, that goes against the value of telling the truth. That goes against the moral of bearing false witness. That goes against the law of, perjuring oneself because you promised to your child to be honest. And yet, ethically, as a parent raising a child, we kind of recognize, at least in a Christian tradition, that, you know what? Telling a kid that Santa is real, that's just fine. So ethics get kind of interesting that way, okay? So you remember all that, but I wanted to kind of reset our paradigm so that we can understand what Jacob Needleman now is about to talk about when it comes to ethical dilemmas. Okay, so let's look at some of his assertions. Now, when I say Needleman's assertions, an assertion is when he is presenting an idea as fact or as a strongly held belief, and he is trying to persuade us that his assertions, his ideas, his beliefs, his facts have merit. So he's trying to persuade us of something. That doesn't necessarily mean that I or you should necessarily agree or disagree with what he says. It's his offering these assertions, and it's up to us to analyze them, think about them critically, and decide for ourselves if we agree. So with that in mind, let's look at some things here. All right, so I want to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a lot of stories today, by the way. Do you know how the cuckoo bird works? I know. You're like, hold on, we were talking about Nadelman and philosophy, and you're talking about cuckoo bird. There's a point, okay? Cuckoo bird, he's a scoundrel. So the cuckoo bird puts her eggs in the nest of a reed wobbler. All right, so she's got this egg she needs to lay. She finds the nest of a reed wobbler. She doesn't even make her own nest. So she goes ahead and lays the egg, and then when the cuckoo chick hatches, that chick will push the other eggs out of the reed wobbler eggs, will push those eggs out so that chick is the only chick in the nest. And the reed wobbler, that poor bird, she just doesn't know the difference. She's driven to take care of the chick. And so the chick is this giant, yes, Nicholas, this is a parasitic relationship. And so the reed wobbler is raising the cuckoo bird chick, thinking that this is the most important thing in her life, not realizing that's not her frickin' chick. Okay, what the heck was this about? Well, check this out. This is something that Jacob Needleman asserts. He says, the world of money has this power to fool us, to deceive us into thinking it's really the most important thing. So what he's saying is, just like the chick has a way of fooling the reed wobbler into thinking that this chick is the most important thing in her life, when in fact she is not nurturing her species, her offspring, her DNA, her genes at all. But she's working her butt off for the sake of a parasitic, as Nicholas points out, a parasitic creature. Jacob Needleman says money does the same thing. It has this way of fooling us into deceiving us into thinking that it's the most important thing in the world. So let's do this. I want you to tell me, and I'm putting 2 minutes on these today. What are some ways in which money fools us into thinking that it's the most important thing, and in fact kind of tempts us to pay less attention to things that truly do matter in the grand scheme of things, and more attention to it, which is really not as important. So let's play with this idea in the comments. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of these. So, one of the things Nicholas says is anyone who flexes their wealth encourages this sort of behavior. You know what? It's really true. So money, the rich, remember we talked about this, especially with Veblen and pecuniary emulation. We perceive the wealthy as successful, smart, powerful, all this sort of stuff. And we aspire to be successful, smart, powerful. And that's actually a fine aspiration. But what happens is we start to think that it's money that does that versus our relationships, our influence, our reputation, our word, our bond. These are the things that make you smart, successful, and powerful. But, oh, screw all that. I'll just get the money, and people will make that assumption. I like it. Let's see. Kaylee, you said the amount of money you make at work rather than the job duties is often leads to factor, accept a job. Yes, here's the idea. I'm not really sure I like that job. That job's not really for me. I'm not really sure it's the right fit, but dang, it pays how much? Oh, I'm all over that. And so what happens is you end up taking a job that you're not well suited for, that you do not enjoy, that does not rouse your, passions, your intrinsic motivators. And yet you basically sacrifice your life on the altar of money because you accepted that job to get the money. You spend more of your, folks, listen, you spend more of your waking hours at work and with your coworkers than you do anywhere else in your life. You will spend the majority of your waking hours at work with your coworkers. Well, if you do it just for the money, it's going to be miserable. So, Kaylee, I really like that. All right. So, Mariana, there's always the idea that when you spend some money, let's see, when you spend some money, we will have to make more. Work more hours to have money when in reality, this isn't really the case. I like that. I have a very close friend. She's my business partner who has a son who, in fact, lives a super, super, super minimalist lifestyle. And the reason he does this is he says, I don't want to be a slave to money. As we talked about last week, you can actually enslave yourself to your possessions, to your wealth, and to your money and to your job. And after a while, you just lose the opportunity to enjoy it all. And so he says, I'm not going to get there. I like that. Brock, well, because we aren't hunters-gatherers anymore and have to rely on money to provide our most basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, etc., this is why money is looked at so essentially for our lives. Yes. It used to be that you could pretty much provide for yourself, right? And to your point, Brock, I often run across these articles. I do not remember the articles. I cannot therefore cite them, but you can probably find them. I've run across these articles that say that if you want to live the lifestyle of, say, somebody 100 years ago, you could live on $20,000 a year. I'm making that number up. But the point is, the lifestyle of somebody 20 years ago or 100 years ago is really affordable. Really affordable. But we don't want to live that lifestyle. Check this crap out. I've got, whoa. Didn't go into focus, but I've got all kinds of cool stuff, right? I want to live the lifestyle of today, and that's what money is for. So, Brock, you're absolutely right. We need this, and yet sometimes keeping up with the Joneses becomes more important to us than actually living the life we have. Okay, let's see, Kaylee. People with flashy life are often viewed as happier or better. Therefore, people focus on money to obtain tangible happiness rather than focusing on their happiness. Yes, tangible happiness versus true intrinsic happiness. and what we perceive. I saw this really interesting little interview on this YouTube channel called Behind the Camera. And they're just short little interviews. We're talking 3 or 4 minutes with megastars. And they were interviewing David Tennant. David Tennant, for those of you who don't know, kind of became famous by playing Doctor Who. He was, I think, the 7th Doctor, I believe. I forget the numbers. But he played Doctor Who. He was hugely popular and successful. Well, he said, back before anybody knew me, I could walk into before anybody knew me, I'd just be in a bar or a pub or whatever. And somebody of note, somebody famous, because he hung out with those folks, would walk in and everybody was like, ooh, wow. Oh, did you see it? So-and-so, it's so-and-so. And he said, I always kind of thought that was like a form of power that the person had. And they must really enjoy it because that's power and influence and prestige. And wow, they must really enjoy it. He says, no. After becoming Doctor Who, and people would do that when I walked in the room, it was a feeling of vulnerability, of just being on display in a sort of vulgar, vulnerable way. And so the things that we think will give us happiness are not always the things that do. Okay, excellent conversation, guys. Excellent. All right, let's continue on. Okay, so I'm going to tell you another story, and then we're going to go to a Jacob Needleman quote. Back about 14 centuries ago, I worked with this crew of people at Intel Corporation. And our boss, Penny, and she's actually the one who is my business partner today. She was the boss of this team. And as an icebreaker at an activity, she said, if you didn't have to earn a living, what would you do with your time? So if money were no object, you don't need to earn a living, what would you do? And it was really interesting. A lot of people said, well, I would write a book, or I would start a nonprofit, or I would volunteer for this sort of thing, or I would create art. In other words, but the thing that struck me is that nobody in that room said, I would work for the world's largest semiconductor company and be a middle manager. Now, I want to be clear. These people were all highly successful, highly educated, and highly compensated. And we were all very successful in our careers and our roles. And yet, if money were taken out of the picture, none of us said, I would be doing exactly what I'm doing right now. And I just thought, whoa. What is success then? So with that, here's what Needleman says. He said, I held a seminar a few weeks ago and I asked them what their questions were. And almost all of them had the same question. How do I engage in making a living and still keep my soul? They feel that the world of money, the world that they are forced to live in, is sucking their soul dry. And they cannot keep their self-respect or their sense of inner worth and still participate in the money world. They want meaning. People come for meaning. And he's right. I believe he's right. I believe that, yes, we kind of, prostitute ourselves to earn the money because, as Brock points out, that's how you get what you need. And so we spend 8-10 hours a day at work and we do what we're told to do so that somebody will give us money so that every once in a while we can buy something cool, go somewhere awesome, what have you, but not very often. And yet in that process, we feel like we're kind of losing our soul, losing our sense of true value. We've converted our value as a person into our value as an economic contributor. And we're no longer a person, an entity, a sentient being. We are now a cog in the system. And I believe that Alienated Labor and Mike Lefebvre would look at this statement from Needleman and be like, yeah, totally. Many people ask, why did I leave the corporate world to go into academia? Not fully, but this was part of it. This was part of it. Don't get me wrong. I really, really, really enjoyed Intel Corporation. I really enjoyed working with the people I did. And many of these folks I still have really close relationships with today. So it was a highly rewarding time. But it wasn't feeding a part of who I was that I thought was an important part. And so I shifted over to academia. And maybe some of you have felt the same thing at some point in your life. You may very well in the future. Okay. Here's another quick story, and then we'll go to a Needleman quote. I was actually interviewing this guy one time for a job. We had a job opening, and it was with Intel. And it was a good job opening. He was a good fit. And I mean, he was a good fit for the job. The job was a good fit for him. He wanted to raise his family in Utah, and this was a Utah job. So I thought everything was on track. But he said no. He wanted his first job to be out in the Bay Area. He wanted to move his family to the Bay Area for his first job. Now, I grew up in the Bay Area, and that was a phenomenal place to grow up. But you don't want to go there today, people. You don't want to go there today. No right-minded person would want to move their family to the Bay Area. Except, in the Bay Area, for his very first job here with an MBA would probably be $75,000 to $80,000. The very same first job in the Bay Area would probably be $120,000 to $150,000. Now, mind you, his standard of living is going to be much, much less on $150,000 than it would be here for $80,000, right? Well, then why is he going to the Bay Area for $150,000 when that's a lower standard of living and he wants to live in Utah? Well, his logic is this, and by the way, his logic is sound. Your first professional job out of college really kind of sets the bar for all your future raises. So if your first job is $150,000, then every year when you get, say, 3% raise, that 3% is going to be a lot more than a 3% raise when your first job was $80,000. And so therefore, if you're looking at your whole lifetime in earning potential, it makes sense to make your first job your highest paying job. Well, that makes all the sense in the world on paper. But I couldn't help but think, you're making serious, serious life decisions for your whole family for something that is very, very, very money-based. Now, I want to be clear. It's actually really smart what he's doing. And it's showing real planning and forecasting. But it just struck me as distasteful, but maybe that's just where I was at the time. So let's see what I'm connecting with Needleman here. He says, our want for money, money, more than anything else. But the things we're supposed to buy no longer bring us joy. Home, family, education, travel, the pursuit of knowledge. All these aspects of human life for which money was meant to serve as a means are more and more becoming drained of intrinsic meaning. And the only thing left that has any meaning is the means itself. Money becomes more vivid, more intense than any of the experiences it brings us. So what he's saying is, Money was intended, invented, created, imagined to be a means by which you can buy a home, buy the things you need, go on, travel, educate yourself, experience your hobbies, be a fully formed human being. None of those things have value anymore. Well, not none and no value, but they have less value. Now it's more about how much money am I earning and how much am I saving and what can I show off. And so if you're kind of thinking, well, gee, I'd really like to go do this, but what would it cost? And I don't want to give up my savings account or something like that. It's saying, well, okay, that may very well be the really, really smart financial thing to do. But at what point do we no longer do things that are truly important in our lives to enrich our souls because we don't value them as much as money? That's what he's asking us. Okay. He also has a really interesting take on debt. All right, so let's see what he talks about in terms of debt. The medieval laws against usury were based on an attempt to understand what money really meant. Money was a means of organizing the material needs of human life, at the same time recognizing that we are dependent on one another in the human family and that we're meant to serve something much higher. In other words, you didn't go for a loan in medieval times unless you really needed it. So if I loan you money, it's because you needed it. And I should not profit from the desperation. But now our whole society is based on loans. So remember, he said that money is meant to be kind of an index or a facilitator of human relationships, okay? And because we are all humans and we are all highly dependent on one another, we need one another. We need one another. Then we need to make sure that those relationships are really, really taken care of. We do not take these relationships for granted. And in the past, money and debt, it recognized the relationships. You don't get a loan unless you really need something. And if you really need something and you borrow money, we should not take advantage of that desperation. We did not have usury. And remember, in a past lecture, we talked in depth about how the different religious traditions viewed interest and usury. And without exception, all of them took a pretty dim view of interest. Some in different ways, but it was a dim view because the intent was not make money. The intent was nurture the human relationship. Okay. Let's see. I see a comment here. Let's see. So Nicholas, is it possible to take out a loan and put that money into a CD and then pay, now, okay, interesting question, Nicholas. Here's the thing about loans today. It's a different thing, right? And if what you're buying creates more value than the interest, then if this were a personal finance class, we would say take out the loan, right? So if you're taking out a loan for something that's at 3% interest and you're investing it in something that's going to get you a 10% return, well, then that's a no-brainer. You take out the loan. The thing is, that's not how we think. We take out the loan because we want it, right? We just want it. And so that's where it's like, all right, taking out a loan at RC Willey to get a really cool couch, are you going to get a greater return on that? That's where things are different. Okay. He also has a really interesting take on the idea of inflation. Now, I want to be clear. The vast majority of you in this lecture right now, and even those of you watching this later on, you have not experienced inflation at the level that your parents did. In the 1970s, which was really the last time that we experienced mega inflation, it was awful. It was horrible. I mean, uh, what cost $10 one day, a month later could cost $15. It was just crazy how much inflation was going nuts. And so back in the day, back when Needleman and Bill Moyer and so forth were talking about this, inflation was the boogeyman. We have not had serious inflation for 30, 35 years, okay? Nevertheless, let's see what he says about inflation, because it's an interesting idea. He said, money has become a promise and not an entity in itself. Inflation, in that sense, is what I would call a slowly breaking promise. Because the money we have is, in a certain sense of the term, losing value. If money is meant to be an index or an instrument involving human relationships, the money has to do with ethics. It is a way of exchanging with each other what we need, of implementing the human-to-human relationship. So, if there's such a thing as inflation or that sort of thing, it means something is going wrong with the human relationships. Okay, what's he mean? Well, all right, here's the thing. Let's say that we live in a world where there's bad inflation, okay? And you work for me and you do $100 worth of work, okay? And so I pay you $100. Now, I have received the $100 worth of value. You worked for me. I received that value. Therefore, I have in my net worth an additional $100 of value. And I give you $100. All right, fantastic. But now, 6 months later, that $100 that I gave you cannot buy what it did when I first gave it to you. It can only buy you about $70, okay? Well, I still have the $100 of value because it's not an actual physical value, right? I still have the value, but what I gave you is no longer worth what you gave up to get that $100. Now, I know that's kind of a strange idea to wrap your mind around, but the idea is that the work you do doesn't have less value, but what you get in return has less and less value over time, which means that's the breaking of a human social contract. This is what Needleman is asserting. It's an interesting thought. Okay. I'm going to end our Needleman lecture with a quote from that grand philosopher, Billy Idol. It doesn't matter about money, having it, not having it, or having clothes or not having them. You're still left alone with yourself in the end. And just take it from me as somebody who's been on this earth for half a century and has gone through the whole corporate world and bachelor's, master's, PhD, certifications, so on and so forth. You know what? You can chase all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, you still have to live with yourself. You still have to know what is of value to yourself and how are you going to, view yourself in the greater world and in your community. And so, try not to let money become the cuckoo chick, right? Feed that thing which is truly important. Okay, that's Needleman. Funky ideas, I know, but that's philosophy for you. I love philosophy. All right, now let us talk about the greening of corporate America. This is about environmentalism and the trend toward environmentalism in corporate America. Let's take a couple minutes and respond to this for me, if you would. Why do companies go green? What motivates a company to put in place environmental practices. So let's see what you have to offer there. Okay, let's take a look at this. I'm going to bring this over here. All right. So Brock says it's because first he said it's good for business, and it totally is good for business. We're going to talk about that. But he then explored it further because the trend and a lot of people see this as a good thing. So whether or not the company really supports it or not, they can make a lot of money just by saying that they'll go out and say be carbon neutral by 2030. Yeah, totally. There's a lot of pluses to it, and we're going to explore those. Kaylee said sometimes for personal value or ethical reasons, sometimes for the public interest or for the public perception, as Brock points out. Totally. Marianne says it makes them save money and people invest in them because they're being eco-friendly. Yes, not only does it make customers happier, it makes investors more happy. And furthermore, they're saving money by being eco-friendly. We're going to talk about that as well. Who knows what happens in 30 years? You're totally right, Brock. Okay. So let's look at this. Here's the thing about environmentalism is that there's a lot of things that frankly, they need better PR. And they need PR that is willing to look at cold, harsh reality. I maintain that being environmentally conscious for corporate America is absolutely the right thing to do. It's right. It's prima facie. It is the right thing to do. However, let's just play with this for a moment. Let's pretend for a moment that we don't give a rat's patootie about what's right. Let's pretend that we are a cold-hearted, just dyed-in-the-wool capitalist, and unless it can make me money, I don't care about it. Right, wrong, doesn't matter. If it doesn't make me money, I don't want to hear about it. Well, I'm going to make the case, and the article makes the case that you're going to read, that it makes money. And oh my gosh, does it make money? And you guys already pointed this out. You know it makes money. Let's play with these things. So one of the things that the opponents of Environmental Regulation say they call it new taxes. Let's read this and explore what they mean. Environmental management first captured most of the U.S. corporations' attention in the early 1970s. I was there. Yes, it did. When the federal government passed a slew of new environmental laws. And oh my gosh, did they ever. The new regulations weren't exactly lauded in corporate America, meaning celebrated. In fact, many companies drag their feet on environmental issues, often viewing the new regulations as expensive new taxes on business. So what do they mean by new taxes? Well, here's the idea, is environment is for the public good. And everybody should participate in whatever the public good is. And that's what the government is in place for. If the government is in place for our own protection, say the military or National Guard, we tax everyone. If the government is going to get in the education business, which it is, we tax everyone. But what the companies were saying is, all right, the government has apparently decided that environmental conditions is a public good, that it is the role of the government to safeguard the environment. And yet, all you're doing is making us put in new regulations, follow new regulations, and therefore pay for these new regulations. We need to redo our plants. We need to redo how we do things. We need to redo all this, and that's uber expensive. And so, if this is a public good, tax everyone, but you're not taxing everyone. You're just taxing us, because you're making us follow these new regulations. That's what they meant by a new tax. Well, here's the thing, though. Cracked voice. It's not just public relations, or at least it shouldn't be, right? Watch this. These efforts are not all the service are not all in the service of public good public relations. I apologize. I'm actually really bad at reading aloud. You guys have probably already figured that out, but it's not something I'm good at. Bankrupted economy. We'll talk about that. Okay, these efforts are not all in the service of good public relations. Evidence suggests that superior environmental performance can enhance worker productivity and produce quality, and in many cases, environmentally responsible firms also boast superior financial performance. So, it says evidence suggests. Let's look at the evidence. So, it is pretty much standard practice that when you look at the companies, no, I'm not. I'm not great at reading loud. If you look at the companies who really practice superior environmental practices and so forth, they do really well financially. I mean, really well financially. So this is from Newsweek. This is 2017. Companies that are among the most environmentally conscious companies include L'Oreal, Cisco, Apple, Adidas, Siemens, Accenture, Hasbro, Johnson & Johnson. I'm just going to guess that you've heard of these companies. Just going to throw it out there. Why have you heard of these companies? Because they're so successful, it's disgusting. These people earn bank. Well, now, if environmental regulation is going to destroy companies, why are they earning so much? Okay, well, there's an answer for that. I'm going to tell you the story about Subaru's zero landfill factories. Subaru has a policy, a practice, and by the way, it took them years to figure out how to do this. This did not happen overnight. If you're interested in learning more, there's an article here in Scientific America about how they did it. There's also a video about how they did it. It took them a long time. But here's the thing. We are talking automobile factories with zero waste. Nothing thrown away. Nothing thrown in landfills. Everything is either used up completely or it is recycled. Okay? That's it. Now, again, it took them a long time to figure out how to do it. And it's actually a really fascinating story because even the factories, when Subaru said, hey, you're going to go zero waste, the factories fell down on the ground and just laughed their guts out because they said it couldn't be done. They said it couldn't be done. Well, it can. But here's the thing. One of the things they discovered. You make a lot of money when you do zero waste. Oh my gosh, you make money. So let me explain. It's not a hard concept to get. Those are my trash cans. Okay? So let me tell you what I do. I go to the store and I purchase something. So I give my money. So already I'm giving my money to bring something home. So I go ahead and I unwrap it. And now I've got this wrapper. All right, what am I going to do with it? Well, I put it in one of these containers. Okay? And then I wheel that container out to the front curb and I pay the city to take away the stuff that I bought. Okay? Think about it. I pay money to the city, the county, to take away and bury in the ground the stuff that I purchased. So now, if I can figure out a way to go zero waste, I save money on two fronts. First of all, I don't buy the crap in the first place. I don't need it, or I recycle it. And second, I don't pay somebody else to haul it off. You see what I mean? And so even if you are a hard-nosed, just cold-hearted capitalist that says, I don't want to hear about anything unless it makes me money, environmentalism should be top on your list because waste costs money. And environmental pollution is all about waste. It's all about waste. Okay? So check those out if you're really interested. All right. Now, people using their money really care about this. You know, you've heard the term voting with their dollars, right? Well, people vote with their dollars. Increasing number of consumers are getting into the act, diligently monitoring companies' environmental actions. Many now simply expect corporations to be environmentally responsible and express that expectation by voting with their pocketbooks. Okay? Yeah, need to save the world by saving our wallets. You know, it's a really interesting thing, right? Money has an interesting effect. So recently, I think it's the Redskins, they're changing their name. They're changing their name. I don't know what they're changing their name to. I don't know if that announcement has come out yet. If it has come out and you know the name, do me a favor, put it in the comments. Let's see, Redskins. Are they baseball? I think they're baseball. As you can tell, I don't do sports. Anyway, so people have been protesting for decades and decades about the Redskins' names. They've been protesting on and on and on and on. And the Redskins are like, wah, 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 wah. I don't care. But here very recently, all the big sponsors of the team and of their stadium and so forth, all the sponsors have said, we're pulling our dollars. We're pulling our dollars. We're no longer going to be sponsors until you take care of this name thing. Well, now all of a sudden they've got to change their name. They've got to change their name. Well, why weren't you so interested in changing your name when people were just protesting? Because protest, that's nothing. But you talk about our sponsorship dollars and them's fighting words. We got to do something. Well, it's the same thing with environmentalism. Okay, sure, we can all have tree hugger hippies. I'm a tree hugger hippie. But we can all have tree hugger hippies join Greenpeace and picket around and say, hey, we need to, save the forests and the oceans and so forth. Companies won't listen. But if you start dealing with their bottom line and start messing with their bottom line, oh, hell yeah, they're going to listen. So yeah, we got to save the planet by saving our wallets. It's absolutely true. Okay, so Brock, Washington football team right now. Okay, so it's football, not baseball. I apologize. And they haven't agreed on a new name yet. So right now it's just Washington football team. Interesting. Okay. Thank you for checking that out. Okay. Greening, the environmental responsibility. Everybody, even our customers and suppliers, are energized by our environmental efforts, says Ray Anderson, Interface CEO, who speaks with an evangelical zeal since experiencing a tearful epiphany several years ago over his company's lackluster environmental performance. There's no doubt the initiative are going to give us a competitive edge. Okay, this is the thing. He believes, and the evidence supports him, that their environmental practices are going to give them a competitive edge over the competition. Why? Because they're going to waste less, which means they're going to spend less. And then they are going to get new customers, and they're going to get really loyal customers, and they're going to get loyal stakeholders, and they're going to be included in all the green investment portfolios and so forth. He's absolutely right. Whether you call it PR or window dressing or what have you, the evidence is clear. Remember, we're talking about money as the perception of value. Money is not real. Money is the perception of value. So even if you say environmentalism is just about perception, well, hell, everything's perception, including money. So it pays. It pays really well. Okay. Quote, ending our little talk about environmentalism. The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. I really like this one because we, in fact, do indeed create our own realities. Now, not to get all philosophical again, right? But we can only experience reality through our senses, and our senses are highly flawed. So we really don't know what reality is except for the perceptions that we have in our own consciousness. Well, if you want to change reality, you need to change your perceptions and you need to change your practices. So I like this. Okay. Last one. And it's a short one. Cooperation in industry, John Rockefeller Jr. If you ever have the opportunity to watch a documentary about the Rockefellers, I highly encourage it, especially if it's about Junior. So Junior is the son of Senior. That's sort of the way it works. And Senior, he's the one who made $1 bazillion as, a robber baron in the steel and oil industry. I think it was mostly steel. Oh my gosh, this is back before monopolies were a bad thing. I mean, he just made so much money. And John Rockefeller was his only son. and took on the business. However, Rockefeller Sr. felt that he deserved all the money he got because God blessed him to earn all that money. He was a very religious man, and so he felt that the reason he was so wealthy is because he was so, so righteous and so blessed, and therefore God bestowed upon Rockefeller Sr. all of his success, and therefore he had every right to it. Junior was really he took a different tone. And Rockefeller Jr. is known more for his work as a philanthropist than really as a tycoon. Now, he made money, don't get me wrong. He took good care of the company, but he gave a ton of money away. So, and I mean, the mind boggles at how much money he gave away and how much that money built the country. Our national park system, the Grand Tetons, he bought it and gave it to the government. I mean, it's just amazing what he's done. And so he has a very different view of labor and social responsibility than his father did. And so I think it's appropriate that we end with some of his words. Remember, we're talking social responsibility. And he said that there are really 4 parties to industry. And the first 3, you're going to totally recognize. We've been talking about capital and management and labor for ages. First, it just started with labor. We started with labor. And then we created this idea of capital. And then we had these 2 forces at loggerheads around capital and labor. And then a couple of weeks ago, we introduced the idea of management. The idea that managers, that's an actual distinct function. And that we should have good managers, according to Andrew Carnegie, right? But now Rockefeller adds a 4th. And this one it's still not universally accepted. Although it's universally accepted if we care about what our customers and stakeholders want. He said the 4th pillar or party is the community. And this is what he says. This is from the reading. When he first talks about capital, management, and labor, he goes into detail, and then he says, here the list usually ends. The 4th party, namely community, those whose interest is vital in the last analysis controlling, is too often ignored. The community's right to representation in the control of industry and in the shaping of industry's policies similar to that of other parties. Now, listen to this. Were it not for the community's contribution in maintaining law and order, in providing agencies of transportation and communication, in furnishing systems of money and credit, and rendering other services, all involving continuous outlays, the operation of capital management and labor would be enormously hampered, if not rendered well nigh impossible. What's he saying? He says, listen, you can't have industry if you don't have law and order, if you don't have transportation, if you don't have education, if you don't have financial systems, if you don't have all these things that require constant investment from the community. So you cannot drive your trucks on roads built by the community and say, it's not our responsibility to look after the community. You cannot take out loans and work in a financial system buoyed up by the community and then say, we're not responsible for looking after the community. He believed strongly that that business thrives in this entire ecosystem created by and constantly buoyed up by the community. And so, therefore, to say that you don't owe the community anything is baloney, right? It's kind of like an 18-year-old kid who's raised by good parents who provided and did all this and so on and so forth. An 8-year-old kid saying, you know what? I've never been given anything a day of my life. I pulled myself up from my bootstraps. I owe nobody anything. And it's like, dude, you grew up in an entire ecosystem of support from your parents and their jobs in the community and the churches and the synagogues and the mosques and the schools and the transportation and everything. And you're saying you did it all yourself? Wow. Okay. Well, that's what Rockefeller is asserting. All right. And there are economists even today who disagree with this. Okay. But that's another topic. All right. He felt that the purpose of industry was to distribute goods equally among individuals, specifically the employees. Now, this morning when I was driving in, I heard a really interesting podcast. It's an NPR podcast called The Indicator. They're a podcast of Planet Money. And it's very short. It's only 9 minutes, okay? It came out July 24th, so just a few days ago, called The Power of Workers. And I invite you to listen to it. It's very short, but one of the assertions that this podcast makes is that the power of workers has really, really declined over the last 50 years or so. And what's one of the ways that power of workers has declined? Well, what they have found through the research is that in the past, workers would get a certain percentage of the profits that a company makes. And I'm just going to make a number up. I'm going to say 20%. I'm just making that number up. So traditionally in the past, workers would get 20% of the profits. Well, where would the other 80% go? Well, it'd go to, continuing to build the company, research development, and to shareholders. Because remember, shareholders are the investors who make all these things possible. Okay. Well, what they found over the last few decades is that the percentage of profits that go to the employees has reduced. At the same time, the percentage of profits that go to the shareholders has increased. Therefore, what they're saying is that there's been a reallocation of wealth, whereas in the past we would recognize the workers as those who made this wealth possible. Today we look at shareholders as those who make this wealth possible, and therefore we're rewarding them differently. Well, I thought of this podcast when I reread this piece this morning and said that, Rockefeller felt that the purpose of industry is to take care of the employees, everybody, right? And if that's the case, then this purpose of industry has degraded over the decades. So just a thought. I'm going to end with one of the things he has in the article. By the way, when you go into the article, just download the PDF. At one point, you're going to go through Canvas, and it's going to be this great big gray wall, and it's going to say, oh, I can't download, it can't work. And you go, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Just hit the previous button, and there's a little thing saying, hey, if you can't see the article, just download the PDF. Just download the PDF. But one of the things you're going to see is what he has as the industrial creed. Things that he believes and he thinks industry should embrace. I want to share with you 2 through 5 just because they're my favorites, and then we're going to wrap up. He said, I believe that community is an essential party in industry and that it should have adequate representation with the others being capital, management, and labor. This is even not fully accepted today, I'm sorry to say. Number 3, he says, I believe that the purpose of industry is quite as much to advance social well-being as material prosperity. It's not just about the Benjamins. It's not just about making money. And you know what? Jacob Needleman would read this and cry tears of joy. It's not just about material prosperity. It is about social well-being. If industry is not meeting is not helping to ensure social well-being of itself and employees and the community, he feels it fails. Okay? Number 4, I believe that every man is entitled to an opportunity to earn a living, to fair wages, to responsible hours of work and proper working conditions, a decent home, the opportunity to play, to learn, to worship, and to love, as well as to toil and the responsibility and so forth. People are not just on this earth to work as cogs in the system, to be cogs in industry. We're here to learn, to grow, to love, to be worshipful beings, to be loving beings, and that we're entitled to this. Now, I have to tell you guys, this is Rockefeller talking, and if Karl Marx were reading this, he would be crying tears of joy, because Karl Marx believed strongly that work was there to help us fulfill our species' essence, but that our species' essence includes worshiping, art, and deliberation, and good conversation, and time alone. Last one, number 5. I believe that diligence, initiative, and efficiency, wherever found, should be encouraged and adequately rewarded. The indolence, indifference, and restriction of production should be discountenanced. I've never used that word before. Discountenanced, and that service is the only justification for the possession of power. Service is the only justification for the possession of power. If you hold power and do not use it in the service of your fellow men and women, then you are not justified in having that power, is what he's asserting. I've read this many times, of course, and every time I do, I think, I'm going to think about this in different ways. I need to explore this and find ways that I can bring this to bear more in my life as a father, as a consultant, as an educator, as, everything in my life. So it's powerful to me. And, oh, yeah, I had this cool little animation that I skipped. And folks, there you are. Great job. And thank you so much for being a part of this. Obviously, since we're holding a lecture class remotely, we've had to find new ways to communicate and to lecture on the material. I've learned a lot from the technical side. I've made a lot of improvements. There are many more improvements that I want to make in the fall. And so I'm going to be publishing many, many more videos in the fall. So I hope you'll continue to come to Nutshell Brainery and check it out. I hope you'll continue to support this and to encourage professors, myself and others included, to really find new ways to bring this technology to bear. Of course, in the fall, we're going to have a mix of online as well as remote lecture and face-to-face. So please be safe and please, practice good social distancing, good hygiene, face mask, all that good stuff. When we return next week. We're going to prepare for the final. Once again, if you come for that preparation, take notes and contribute and discuss as you always have been, I promise you're going to do fine in the final. It's really that simple. And if you haven't, register for fall. Register for fall. If you're looking for a CM credit, the communication credit, might I invite you to check out Business 2200, Business Communication. I have a couple of online classes that are available. If you need those credits, join me and we'll continue this. So that's it, folks. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. If you have any questions, please ask them. I am staying right here, even though I am going to go to the thank you for joining me slide. But I'll stay here for 10 minutes or so to ask any questions. But in the meantime, have a great day and a fantastic week, and we'll talk to you again soon. We'll see ya.